There is another big part of this story, one we highlighted quite a bit last night, the disposition of Iran's nuclear program, specifically its uranium and its ability to enrich it to weapons-grade levels. About that, we begin tonight with CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs correspondent and Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan. Also joining us at the table, CBS News national security analyst Aaron MacLean. We've mentioned this before, worth mentioning again. He also hosts School of War podcast. Margaret, to start with you, you had a very important interview with the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency about Iran and its nuclear potential. What did you learn?
Yes, Rafael Grossi is the Director General of the UN watchdog on nuclear programs. They send inspectors around the world to make sure countries are living up to the law as they attest to it. And he became part of this conversation because it was that data about what you keep hearing about, the 60% enriched uranium, the 400 or so kilograms. That was all IAEA data. He's here in Washington. He's talking to top Trump administration officials about what comes next after these combat operations end. He was extremely clear that you cannot end this extremely sophisticated, as he put it, and extensive nuclear program. You cannot kill it through military action alone. And when we spoke, I asked him to explain what he thinks is coming next. I also put to him what the Director of National Intelligence testified to Congress about, which was her proclamation that Iran, their ability to enrich uranium was obliterated, and there have been no efforts since June, since the 12-day war, by Iran to rebuild their capacity. Take a listen. The U.S. Director of National Intelligence told Congress yesterday that Iran's enrichment program was obliterated, that the U.S. has seen no efforts to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. Do you agree with that assessment? Do you have any indication that the new Supreme Leader would want a weapons program?
Well, I don't disagree with that. We don't see major activity, which is logical because there is a military campaign ongoing. Whatever you're not going to start, bringing cranes and workers.
But they weren't doing it in the lead up to the war either, according to the Secretary of State.
Maybe. By the way, what we have is satellite imagery. Mm-hmm. All right. So at least the IAEA, maybe others have other technical means or personal means to check what is happening. As far as we are concerned, we haven't seen activity. But as I was saying, a lot has survived. They have the capabilities, they have the knowledge, they have the industrial ability to do that. This is why we need to go back to a negotiating table. It's going to be needed.
So the emphasis there on you can't bomb your way to success here, President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, although Netanyahu did say today that they're destroying nuclear infrastructure. But what Grossi is talking about is you can't bomb away knowledge. You can't unlearn the skill set that many of these Iranian scientists have developed. And so ultimately, whether it's with this regime, who has a firm hold, according to U.S. intelligence, or whatever comes next, what happens, not just to that enriched uranium and the centrifuges, but what happens with the aspiration? And to be clear, the IAEA never said Iran was developing a nuclear weapons program after the year 2003, as U.S. intelligence has said, but they just couldn't rule it out entirely either. And that's what leads us to this murky state we are in.
Aaron, one of the topics of conversation in Washington today is there anything diverging about the goals of the Israelis and the United States? Benjamin Netanyahu said today that Iran no longer has the ability to enrich uranium or make ballistic missiles. He also said you can't have a revolution, meaning a regime change, without boots on the ground. You can't do it only through the air. President Trump said today when asked about boots on the ground, I'm not sending troops anywhere. What does this tell us, if anything, about possible divergence of goals or tactics?
Well, if you think back to the very early moments of the war major, when President Trump gave those first remarks the Saturday morning things started, he listed these military objectives, military, the nuclear program, also the Iranian Navy. He spoke actually on that day with a fairly nuanced language about regime change. He basically said, to put it in my own words, regime change would be great, but don't hold me accountable for it. It's not actually the specific goal of the United States. His rhetoric has obviously varied somewhat since then, given the day. For the Israelis, though, if you look at the targets that they're hitting, you look at the kind of decapitation strikes that they're running, you look at their assaults on besieged checkpoints, elements of regime oppression in Tehran, using drones, very small, very targeted explosions, along with very large strikes on things like IRGC facilities, it's clear that they are pursuing regime change, or at least a component of it from the air. pretty aggressively. What sort of ground force is Netanyahu referring to? I mean, President Trump said made reference on the first day to the Iranian people. Prime Minister Netanyahu has encouraged the Iranian people to take to the streets to celebrate the holiday that they had this week. That may be some part of this.
Margaret, you're deeply read in on all this. What is your sense of it, and what is the word you're getting in the region from whether people who are in countries that we are aligned with in the Gulf, are they trying to figure out who's diverging from what in terms of objectives and goals?
Right. Well, from day one, many of the U.S. allies that I've been speaking to have raised that question of, first of all, tell me when it ends, tell me how it ends,
right.
But also we don't want a part of this. They don't want the incoming. And it's the United Arab Emirates and some of those Gulf countries that the U.S. is now expediting defensive weaponry to that have really taken that incoming for being allied with us in the first place. So there is a large degree of concern, but then you're in it, so how do you finish it?
Right.
And what are you leaving us with next door is a very big question. So, and let's be clear here. I mean, if we're talking about human rights, many of our allied nations don't have great human rights records themselves. They're not incredibly uncomfortable with autocratic regimes, right? But they don't like the mischief. They don't like the militias. They don't like the things that destabilize their backyard. So, in other words, you know, the devil.
And right now, they're deeply worried about damage to energy infrastructure, which seems to be increasing, not decreasing.
Yes. And by the way, a lot of the Iranian opposition are sitting in Evin prison up the street, right? Like a lot of the organized leadership, to the degree it even exists, has been repressed, if not killed and shot, as Marco Rubio said under testimony, with snipers, or put in prison. And we're not. Maybe that's a next target. I don't know. But there hasn't been an organized opposition within Iran. So how do you ultimately resolve this stated end goal of dealing with the nuclear program? Who are you negotiating with? And by the way, Mr. Grossi would like it be his agency that goes in and takes out those canisters of enriched uranium.
Aaron, I often burden you with the question, what should we keep track of in the next couple, 3 days? I'm going to burden you with that again. What are you watching?
This question of the nuclear program and what we're going to do about it militarily as the United States and Israel make progress towards expanding air superiority, trying to pursue air dominance across the country. That's the question of the day. Rafael Grossi said to Margaret this morning, you know, you can't bomb away nuclear ambitions. That's certainly true, barring the possibility of regime change. But you can bomb highly enriched uranium. You can blow it in sight. You can render it safe, assuming that the risk imposed by the practical situation on the ground makes it possible to do so. That's presumably why President Trump has not, our colleague Jennifer Jacobs reported yesterday, has not yet made a decision about whether or not to do this. I'm sure that there is some assessment of the particular situation on the ground and how feasible action would actually be.
But you don't negotiate that in 4 to 6 weeks, even if you end combat operations. The rest of this is going to take some time.
Take some time for sure. Margaret Brennan, Aaron MacLean, thank you very much, as always. You can see more of Margaret's interview with Rafael Grossi this Sunday on Face the Nation, 10:30 a.m. Eastern on CBS.